We are very privileged to have Pastor Mandla Lupondwana with us again. He's going to speak to us about the topic for this evening. But I'm going to tell you, I'm 12 years away from 65, and I am so scared of retiring. You guys have no idea. I can't think of myself having to retire to do what? I'm not one of those people that will retire. I'm very sorry. And then also, there's this book. Can you see it? The Retirement Years, written by Ellen G. White, and she's got very interesting topics in there. So I think it's a good book to read to maybe prepare ourselves for when we do reach that stage of our lives. So welcome everyone, and welcome Pastor for doing this for us this evening. And before you start, I'm just going to open for us with prayer, and then I'm going to hand over to you. Okay. Dear Lord, thank you so much for bringing us all onto this platform this evening. Thank you for Pastor Mandla Lupondwana's willingness to always share his knowledge with us, dear Father. We realize that we are all aging. We're all going to have to retire at some stage. It's such a horrible thought. It's so daunting for me. Maybe it's fine for other people, but I can't think of myself retiring ever. And so please help that we will be useful and make ourselves help other people and be of benefit to you in your cause, no matter what age we are or what we do. And I just pray that you will keep us faithful to you, dear Lord. And I also pray that you'll come soon, dear Father, before we have to retire, or I have to retire, so that I can spend eternity in heaven and just be forever young. This is my prayer in your loving name. Amen. So thank you, everyone. And Pastor, over to you. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome to everybody who's joining us this evening. We're talking about a very, very interesting topic, retirement. I say it's interesting because it's one of those topics you don't always think of having, especially when you are far from retiring, but it's always good to have it when you're still far from retiring. Now, the financial readiness of it, Ruth Lehman, who's director of our pensions at the SAU, is gonna come and do a follow-up on it. And she's gonna go to town with it because that's basically her area. I want to handle some of the other aspects of retirement, the preparedness, so that we can have the benefit of both aspects of both angles on the topic of retirement. We don't want to talk about preparing and adjusting to retirement. Now, the interesting thing about retirement is that it's job related. Retirement is leaving your job and ceasing to work full-time for a living. That's what it is. Now you'll notice that I've talked about ceasing to work full-time for a living, because it's possible for you to work probably part-time, but hopefully at retirement you're not working for a living full-time. That's the whole idea. The history of retirement and pensions and so on is very old. I mean, it started in Germany in the 19th century. The people were really having some revolts on social matters because they felt they needed the government to take care of them. And so, boom, they introduced pensions. But the initial pension age was 70. Of course, very few people hit 70. So as much as it was promised to people that the government will take care of you at 70, very few people actually got there. But at least there was this sense that I will no longer need to live, to work for a living beyond 70. Of course, they eventually reduced to 65. And then it spread along to other parts of the world with this concept, this age of retirement, which is 65, which is generally the age of retirement. The interesting thing about South Africa is that there's no real stipulated age for retirement. There isn't. Usually people retire at 65 because it's either their employment contract states that you will retire at 65, or the pension fund rules that your employer is part of stipulate 65, or normal retirement age in the organization or entity you work for is 65. And that's usually what happens. That's how people end up being given notice of 65. Like if you're going, even if it's not in your contract, And if the organization says usually here we retire at 65, and they give you notice that to a certain age you should be retired, that's how you end up retiring. But other than that, there is no thou shalt retire at 65 thing, other than mostly your pension fund rules and employment contracts and the norms of different companies. The early retirement years, which is also pension fund related though, is 55. So you'll find that particularly in South Africa, your pension years have been largely your 55 early retirement, 60 with a large number of people usually go for 60. And then not a large, but significant number when I explain why people go for 60, and then some people go for 65. I read an article a few years back that kind of changed my mind on retirement age. And in this article, they were talking about life after 65, because they were talking about how very few people who retire at 65 get to live beyond 70 or even 75. Those who retire at 65, a significant number of them die between 65 and 70. But people who retire earlier than 65 tend to live longer than the people who have retired at 65. And so they were advising that you retire as early as you financially can. That way you get to live longer and you get to enjoy more of your retirement benefits. It's interesting to know that a number of retirement or pension funds will say, if you die before 70, then we can give your family a balance of pension. But after 70, we do not even expect you to still be alive. So if you die at that point, we're not paying anyone anything. So in their mind, they're budgeting for 5 years because that's when people usually die. So that's what retirement is, and that's how we usually are triggered into retiring. Time has changed though, because you'll find that in the past, when life expectancy was low, by the time you hit 60, 65, you were tired, you were exhausted, you were huffing and puffing, and you were really struggling to get through the day. But now we take care of our health. Things have changed. We don't tax our bodies as we used to tax them before. As a result, by the time you hit 65, you're still in your stride. I mean, you're still sharp mentally, you're still sharp physically. And really, it does not always make sense why you should stop working at 65, because you can really still offer a lot. I mean, in the academic circles, it's when people hit 60, 65 that they start being in their prime. You know, they've accumulated a lifetime of knowledge and expertise. Their value in the space is tremendous. So really the whole idea of retiring at 65 doesn't always make sense, life sense, especially to people who are really doing well health-wise and mentally. Now, be that as it may, we still have to be prepared for retirement. And the first one is emotional readiness. There is a concept called enmeshment. Enmeshment is when the boundaries of your personal life and your work life are kind of blurred. It's not very clear where your personal ends and your professional life picks up. Now, people who are known for their work, and an example would be for us ministers. We are pastors. You are a pastor everywhere you go. You're a minister everywhere you go, and you've got certain responsibilities. And you can't say this is after hours, so I can drink. I'm not on company time. You can't say I'll do these things now because it's you know, I'm on my time. That enmeshment is very easy for us because there is a very blurry line between the personal and the work life, and it happens also with people who are in certain professions. Sometimes your lawyers and your doctors fit in the same space. And you've seen that also with teachers. You've seen it with people who always carry their expertise wherever they go. This is who they are. It will happen sometimes with nurses. Wherever they are, they're always a nurse. You're always this person. You're always this expert. You're always the person in the particular function. And so it has become your identity, because even when you introduce yourself, very shortly when people ask you what you do, you end up going there. And so you retire. The prospect of retirement becomes difficult because you start asking yourself questions like, who am I if I am not this? If I don't do this, then what do I do? And in cases of this enmeshment, you'll find that your work fills up a lot of your time, By saying it fills up a lot of your time, I'm not talking about your regular 8 to 4:30. That's not it. I'm talking about how your work regular spills over after 4:30. And we can't even blame COVID, because for some of us, that was happening before COVID and the restrictions. So we're able to take our work home. We take our work wherever we are, weekends, even when you're on leave. You know, you will just check your emails just to stay abreast with everything. So your work takes up a lot of your time. It takes up a lot of your energy and a lot of your focus, and you pour a lot of yourself into the work. Now imagine when you're going to remove that. When you're going to remove that from your life, it's going to leave a huge hole. So this is why you become a part of your job, and your job becomes a significant part of who you are. This enmeshment, it's when your work eats up your time and your identity, and you're left with very little time for other things. Now, this is an interesting thing. Sometimes we think that the gym helps, but the thing is most of the time when we do the gym, it is because we want the energy to do the work, and we feel good, and we feel ready, we feel energized to go do the work. And so you find that even the exercise, even the going to the gym, is a means to the end. The end is the work, is performance at the work. Now, when you remove the work, whoa, then what do you go to the gym for? Your job, or what you do for a living, has become such a huge part of your life that to remove it, of course, is going to leave a huge gap. Of course, it's going to create tremendous problems. Why? Because this is who you've been for a very long time. Now, people who've had careers, who've started their careers in their 20s, you've done this for 40 years plus. Of course, it's going to affect you when it comes to an end. Of course, it's not going to be the best of scenarios when it comes to an end. Why? You've done it for most of your life. You've been this for most of your life. Even if you're going to say, I started doing it in my 30s, that's 30 years. 30 years is a long time perfecting the skill in one area, you know, having this as part of your identity and growing and having your successes and your failures and learning from your failures and improving who you are and climbing up whatever corporate ladder or whatever ladder there is in your space. Not only sometimes even in position, but in terms of expertise itself. To all of a sudden have that removed from your life, of course it's going to leave a huge hole, and it has messed us up a lot emotionally. Also, this enmeshment happens, you'll see it because since we are so invested in our jobs, most of the people we connect with are work-related. They're job-related people. It's people you work with, it's client, it's colleagues, it's people in the same industry. The bulk of your time is spent there. Now, sometimes it so happens that the people you spend your time with work-wise are also the people you go to church with, which happens a lot to people who work for the church, whether you work for a church school or you're the church entity or whatever. It's easy for us to find that the people we work with are the people we go to church with. And so these are work job-related people. And this usually messes us up when we want to retire and want to move. We'll talk about that later, because if the most of the people you know are work related and you're removed from the workspace, whoa, that leaves a huge gap. And another thing that work usually does, especially for people who are invested in their job, who are professionals, who are experts at what they do, is that your job eventually gives you value. It gives you it gives you a sense of who you are. When your job gives you that value, when the job gives you a sense of who you are, you're known for it, and this is what you're good at. What happens when we remove it? What happens to your value, the sense of usefulness? Sometimes walking away from our jobs or retiring from our jobs can give us a sense of being useless because nobody wants you, nobody needs you, and it can really mess us up emotionally. So the emotional readiness requires that, first of all, we understand that, whoa, there's something called enmeshment, and it has messed up a lot of people at the point of retirement. We usually see it in people who've been laid off, people who've been fired. You've been this, you lose your job. After many years, you get retrenched. And then sometimes we think that the depression that sets in is because of less of income. Sometimes it's not an income thing. Sometimes it's because of enmeshment. The person had become a huge part of their job, and their job had become a huge part of who they are. They do not know who they are outside of their job. And that has happened. Sometimes people have to relocate, move and go to other places, move to other companies. And you get to this company and you are struggling to become what you were over there, where you're coming from, where you are now. And it really, really doesn't fit. And sometimes we've asked people, why don't you move there and get a better pay? If you move to a different city, move to a different country, you can be paid better. And sometimes people are reluctant, not because they wouldn't want the more money, but simply because they do not want to invest in the time. You know, they don't want to invest the time and effort in trying to be what they already are here over there. So yes, that is it. Enmeshment is a big thing, and it can really, really mess us up. And part of the emotional readiness is that we should start diversifying ourselves. For those of us who can think of our job and realize, whoa, my job is a huge part of who I am. Yes, I've got friends, I've got relatives, but in terms of the bulk of my time and energy and focus and creativity, the bulk of the creative juices, the excitement in my life comes from my work. If that's the case, you need to start diversifying yourself, because by the time that job is not there because you have to retire, it's gonna leave a huge hole in your life emotionally, and you may not even be able to cope. And you'll find yourself in that category of people who don't make it to 70 from 65 because of the sense of uselessness, and they just end up just sitting there doing nothing, trying to figure out what to do with themselves. Diversify yourself, spread your time and your emotional and the identity investment. We usually say this in terms of people are going to invest financially. We say, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Put a little bit of it in property, some of it in investment accounts, and some of it put it in stock, some of it put it in there. And we want people to diversify. Why? Because it's not always a good idea to put all of your eggs in one basket. The same thing applies with our emotions, our time, and our energy. Diversify yourself. Don't put it all in one basket. Don't put it all in one basket. Because later on, this huge basket called work is going to move, but you need to have had sufficient investments elsewhere for your life to continue to have meaning and a sense of purpose, even though you're not going to work. We're going to talk about some of those things you can do later on. But first, start thinking to diversify yourself. What would you do that would still give you a sense of meaning? When I started out pastoring, I pastored in Utenig district. And there was a couple, the Bacons. Now, bacon is in, yes, pork, bacon. And they were both retired school principals, Mr. Bacon and Mrs. Bacon, both of them. They were retired school principals. But they had become involved in the local Meals on Wheels operations. So involved, it's something they woke up and did, and they found tremendous joy in it. Now, of course, it was completely unrelated to what they were doing before, but they found a way to invest, to diversify themselves, so that when that job moved out, and they were very good, apparently, from the people who had worked with them at what they do, the personalities were wonderful. So you could tell how they would have been a pleasure to work with and how they could have enjoyed what they did. But the diversification allows your life to continue to have meaning, even after you've lost your job. So think about your life now. If the bulk of your time, excitement, energy, and creativity is job related, start diversifying. And secondly, the emotional thing is to start embracing aging. Start embracing aging. Why? It's happening. You can't run away from it. We spend a lot of time trying to hide the aging process. I have a grandson now, I'm a grandfather. And so I decided to intentionally keep my gray. You see, I still have a little bit of gray here. I've kept it. Why? I'm giving myself time to get used to the fact that I'm aging, I'm graying, and I'm getting these. I'm a grandfather, and I keep on mentioning it, and I'm getting myself used to the idea that yes, I'm aging, and I'm going to retire now. And the more people come, oh, Yongama's grandpa. Yes. The title comes, I laugh at it. Why do I do all that? Because I have to embrace aging. Because sometimes we struggle to embrace aging and we hide the effects of aging. And at 65, when you're forced to retire and you no longer have the need to hide it, that boom, it hits you in your face. You realize, all the things you used to do to try and maintain a prim and proper look of someone who's not aging or is fighting against aging can mess you up. And people will call us old lady, old man, they'll find ways of referring to you as the elderly, and you get shocked. I mean, you really get shocked. Remember, think of the time when you were still young, probably in your 20s or early 30s, when people started calling you auntie, and you're like, yo, or uncle. You're like, hey. Sometimes you see guys who are teenagers or early 20s start calling you auntie and uncle, and you're like, whoa, hey, how did we get there? How did I become a Om or a Tani or whatever? And those initial shocks, of course, are going to hit you later on in life. So it's important that you start embracing it, because when you're faced with a huge decision like retiring, a huge life-changing event like retiring, you want to be dealing with as few things as possible. And one of those things you don't want to be dealing with at that stage is accepting the fact that you've aged. And of course, you're going to have some aches and pains here, and that's it. And people are going to refer you in a particular way. And I also want you to remember that the world we live in generally values youth more than experience. Because at the time you hit 65, man, the knowledge that you have, the expertise that you have is so valuable. And yet they'll rather let you retire and go and then bring in some 22-year-old who knows absolutely zilch about what they're doing. They just have enthusiasm. But you're more valuable now as an asset because of the entire life of your lifetime of acquiring knowledge and expertise and just knowledge of how to deal with people. But that's it, and which means that chances are when it's time for you to hit retirement, they may not see the value of your expertise. The company may not, or the organization you're working with may not see the value of the expertise that you have, and may just be excited about the fact that you're retiring and they're moving on, they're employing younger people. And at that point, so that you don't feel like useless, like you've been discarded, like an old cloth or whatever, it's important that right now we know that yes, we're acquiring and accumulating all of this expertise and knowledge. But when the time comes for us to retire, they will look with bias towards people who are younger, even though they may know almost nothing about this or what you've been doing, and not necessarily favorably towards you with all the expertise and knowledge that they've acquired. But it's important that you do that long before 65. So you don't fight and kick and stream and walk out, leave your work feeling that they did not appreciate you, they didn't value you, they didn't treat you the way you're supposed to be treated. You still had so much you could offer the organization or the company or whatever, or the department that you're working in. Because sometimes we can retire bitter because we did not prepare ourselves for the day when they see youth as more valuable than your experience and expertise. So it's going to come. It's going to come. It's good that you embrace it, and sometimes even talk to people about it. As you talk to your children, one day I'm going to retire. Just you talk about it and prepare yourself so that you are emotionally prepared for the idea of retiring. Now, it's important that as we talk about retirement, one of the first things we need to understand is your job. Your job, whatever your job is, it's not who you are. It's what you do. Your job is what you do. You are more than what you do. You are more than what you do for a living. And even when that is no longer there, you will still be there, still be valuable, and you will still have a lot to contribute. And with the knowledge that you will have acquired, you will be valuable. It's just that at that point, the organization may not be willing to pay you for it. But the fact that they're not willing to pay you for it does not mean that you have lost any value. So we are not our jobs. We are not our jobs. We are not what we do. We are way more than that. So it's important that we talk about that. So emotionally, you know it. It's part of our readiness. When it comes to time, okay, this is not Klim, it's time. Sorry about the capital letter either. One of the things that retired people usually, okay, the mindset sometimes is that, and I know that I've had the similar mindset, that look forward to retirement when you can rest and just do nothing and wake up in the morning and have no meetings, no deadlines, nothing, especially for people who have high-paced jobs and all of that. After a month, it's no longer a holiday. It's not. And after a month, you just have a whole lot of free time. That's what you have. And you have to ask yourself this question: what are you going to do with all that free time? You'll have the health initially. If you don't maintain it, of course, it's going to drop drastically. You'll have the health, you'll have the mental awareness. You'll still have your entire skill set from when you were working. And what are you going to do with all the time? Now, if you look at your day, you do stuff in the morning, you rush out to go to work, you're trying to beat traffic, you come back, you still have a lot of things to do, and you go to bed tired because you had a full day. Yes. Now remove the hours you spent preparing to go to work, going to work, being at work, coming back from work. Remove those hours. And you discover you actually have about 3 or 4 hours. And by the time you hit retirement, you lose your sleep around 5. Which means that whatever you used to do, in the morning for the house, preparing, your little hobbies or whatever it is that you do around the house before you go to work and after you come back, once you retire and you lose your sleep at 5, you're done with whatever you need to do at most by 11, and that's a solid 6 hours. But sometimes by 10 or 9 even. And then what do you do with the rest of the day? Yes, you can say I'm going to take a nap, but how often are you going to take a nap? Really, there's something about the mind. There's something about the mind that when you have to go somewhere, you struggle to wake up in the morning. But when you don't have to go anywhere, you're boom, up at 5, fresh. And that's what happens. You are so exhausted, you want to go on a holiday, you go on a holiday, you lose your sleep around 5, you're ready for a full day. And you wonder, why am I never this ready, exercise less when I need to go to work or do other things or go to school or so on. But so by the time you retire, you have to think, man, I have so much time. What are you going to do with it? And this is a part of our planning, of our retirement planning. Usually people say, I've planned well for retirement. They usually talk about the finances, with which Ruth Lehman is going to come and talk about later on. But usually when we talk about retirement, we talk about the financial planning. We've met with our financial planners, and financially we think we're doing okay. Yes, here you are, 65 years old and 3 months. That's your age at this point. What are you doing with your time? You're going to be watching television, and then what? Whatever you watch on television, chances are I was playing the previous evening. What you're doing now is watching a rerun. What are you going to do with all of your time? That's something you have to plan for. Because if you don't plan for it, it's going to hit you very, very hard. Some people have been involved in hobbies. People have found hobbies. Some have even gone back to school to learn an instrument, to learn painting, to learn something else, just to keep their mind sharp, so to give themselves something to do. Someone will say, I've always wanted to do a master's in this. I've always wanted to study that, and they do it. I remember one time speaking to Dr. Kwabena Donko. He was an associate director at the Biblical Research Institute in Washington, DC, at the General Conference headquarters. Now he had come to take classes for us in our master's program, to do some lectures and on theological issues within Seventh-day Adventists. And then afterwards, I was driving with him to the airport, and so I asked him, so what are you going to do? And he talks about how he intends to go on retirement and blah, blah, blah. He's going to go back, I think, to Ghana, where he's from. And so I asked, what are you going to do? He says he's going to start studying. He has found disciplines that he's interested in, and he wants to study. I'm thinking to myself, he wants to study after he retires, but he had a sharp mind. He wanted to use the mind. He wanted to do all kinds of things with it. So some people have picked up a hobby because he wants to just write and talk about the matter. Some people have involved in charity. I've already spoken about the Bacons who got involved in Meals on Wheels. Some people have started a business. I remember I used to serve on the board of Good Hope High School, Good Hope Adventist High School in Cape Town, Kales River, Cape Town. And the principal at the time was Mr. Links. Mr. Links then retires as a school principal and opens a Zebros. I remember we went to his Zebros once, and he was there. He insists you must pay nothing for Mahala. But that's what he did when his retirement. Now, I'm not sure about what happened to the business itself. I just saw it after he had opened it. Some people have started a business. Some people have started a side business. I know that Dr. Wakaba, when he retired as union president, he went into cattle farming. But of course, you have to be careful with those things, because it's something that you don't know. You run a risk of putting your money into it, and then things don't go well, and then you lose a lot more than you initially thought. But you need to find something to do. Some people have decided they want to travel. I'm one of those people who wants to travel. But the traveling business is going to require money. You can't just say you want to spend your retirement years traveling. Do you have time do you have the money to spend all of that time traveling? Remember, it's 12 months a year to travel, and it costs money. Flights cost money, hotels cost money, food costs money, visas cost money. Do you have the retirement nest egg to spend 5, 10, 15 years traveling? If the bulk of that time is not going to be spent traveling, what are you doing in between trips? Let's assume you decide you're going to do a cruise around the world once a year. I've checked the cruises out. They go up to, the longest one that I've seen goes up to 120 days on sea. Beautiful. It starts in Los Angeles and it knocks, I think it ends somewhere in Japan. Some of these cruises end in New Zealand, but it's got many destinations. It stops along. It takes 4 months in a year, and it's close to R500,000 per person. So if it's 2 of you traveling, you're talking almost $1 million. Do you have the nest egg to do that? Then you can say, no, I'm not going to travel like that. I want some. Now, the reason why people who are retired prefer the traveling by boat is simply because the entertainment is there. You don't have to work on it. You don't have to cook. You don't have to wash dishes. You don't have to make up your bed. All of that is sorted out on the boat. But let's assume you decide you want to travel differently. You want to do your own plane bookings. You want to move into your hotel. And do you have the money to do it? If you don't have the money to be traveling 9 months in a year and then spend the other 3 years with your kids and grandkids, then traveling is not what you're going to be spending your retirement on. It's part of what you're going to be doing, but it's not what you're going to be doing because you won't have the money to do it the bulk of the time. So you can't say, when I retire, I want to travel. Of course you want to travel, but you probably will be spending a month or 2 a year. That's if you've got good retirement money. 1 or 2 months a year, every year retiring. But let's assume you've done your 4 months. Let's assume your retirement money is so good that you can do the 4 months around the world trip. Okay, then what do you do with the 8 months? So in terms of planning what you're going to do, you have to sit down and be very honest with yourself to say, this is what I can do, this is what I cannot do. Some people have decided to do some mentorship. They decide, I know this, I'll come and mentor some people who are in my field of work, or just mentor them in life. Or you can decide to volunteer. I remember when I first came to Bloemfontein, we have a school in Bloemfontein, Oram SDA Adventist Academy. And when I got there, one of the ladies used to work as a pensions director at the SCU. We call her Auntie May. So she was working there, helping them with their books. That's what she did. Which is good because she had the expertise and the school needed someone to do something and they did it. Some people, so you could do something like that, but you need to decide, this is what I want to do with my time. And if you don't invest the time, if you don't invest in planning for the time, then retirement can be one long, boring thing that could depress you because you were not ready for this. Feelings of being useless and being unwanted and being unnecessary can creep in because you did not plan for retirement, what you're going to do with the time. And if you haven't planned what you're going to do with your time, your health can decline drastically because you're not in the right frame of mind. So please plan, decide now, what are you going to do with your time? If you want, now the diversifying could start even now. If you want to start a charity, if you want to work for a charity of Meals on Wheels, start now. So you get involved in it so that by the time you retire, it's something you've been doing for a while. If you're going to start a business, if you want to run a business when you're retired, start now. Set up that business now, start small so that by the time you retire, it's no longer something that is taking away your money. Because your retirement money can't be spent starting a business. It could go horribly wrong. Start now while you're still in active service. Start the small business you want to do later on. Even if the business is not designed to generate a lot of profit, but just to give you something to do, that's fine. If you decide, I want to start baking when I'm old and I want to, sell a little bit of cakes, do it now. Get into the baking thing now and start selling it now so that by the time you retire, you are doing something that you like, something that you've been doing for a while. It's not a huge start at the point of retiring. It's more of a transition from this to that. So please start your planning now. Whatever you want to be doing at that point, do it now because it's really going to help you. Now, relationships. When you leave your work, your social circle shrinks. Think about it. The bulk of the people you spend the most of your time with are work-related. They're colleagues, clients, contacts, people that have to do with work. You spend the bulk of your time with those people. Yes, you've got friends and you've got family and so on. but that shrinks. So you need to invest in non-work related friendships. Now, start thinking about your life. Are most of the people that who are in your life, most of your contacts, most of the time, are they work related? If they are, you need to start investing in non-work related friendships, because those are the friendships you'll be able to keep after you retire. Because if you retire and the bulk of your contacts are still people you worked with, then you're gonna have another problem. Part of the problem you're gonna have is that you won't be able to meet them during the day. And when you do come to visit, they really want to see what you've come for, and they can deal with that one thing. And you can't visit them regularly because you're taking up work time. So that's it. Now, this is an interesting thing. Sometimes people retire and they decide they want to relocate. They want to go to the coast. Once you relocate and go to the coast, your social circle shrinks even more. It does. This is when it's important for you to, if you're gonna go somewhere, go visit it once in a while, meet the people in the church, or decide you're gonna get involved when you get there. Because relocating after retirement does have the impact of shrinking your social circle. And if you're gonna do that, it helps if you have a spouse, which brings you to the next one. It helps if you have a spouse, not just a spouse. It helps if you have a relationship with your spouse that can sustain you through retirement. Because once it's just the two of you, and you no longer have kids to take care of, and that will have happened for a while by then, because your kids will have grown and left you. They would have left home for about 10 years or more before you retire. So you would have been an empty nester for a while. Theoretically, it doesn't always happen that way. But theoretically, because these days there's an issue of failure to launch when young people decide, I'm not leaving, it's better for me to stay at home and it's okay. But theoretically, your kids would have left by the time you retire, and then if you've been an empty nester for a while, and it's just you and your spouse. At that point, you need a relationship, a marriage that can carry you into retirement, through retirement. Now, the quality of the marriage must be good, because if you don't get along with the person, then there's nothing. You can't move to the coast with somebody you don't get along with, simply because what are you going to do with all your time? You've left your friends behind, you've left your contacts behind, you've left the people you sing with, the people you do all kinds of things with, the people you served in committees with, people you used to work with. You've left them behind where you used to work and where you used to live and go to church. Now you've moved to the coast, somewhere where the weather is nice, and you've moved here with your spouse that you don't particularly get along with. You've invited some serious problems. So if you're going to move at that point, you need to have a quality of marriage that will be able to sustain you in a new environment as you build new relationships, because this spouse is the one you've known the longest and you're spending the bulk of your time with. So you do that by making sure that now, while you're still younger and you have the energy and you have the time, you work on the quality of your relationship. Start doing your walks now, doing your time together, your hobbies, the things you do together. Improve your communication now. If there are things that you can't talk about because you're sitting on them for peace sake, start working on them now, because you may not have the energy later on to do so. You may not have the quality of marriage later on, quality of relationship later on, for this marriage to be able to sustain you through retirement. And sometimes we have great marriage relationships. Our relationships with the spouses are great. And one of the things we have to think about is that we may not retire with our spouses. In other words, your spouse may die just before retirement. Your spouse may die just shortly after retirement. Then what do you do? Then that doesn't really make sense to move to the coast or wherever that's nicer in terms of weather. You need to be where your social circle is. And at that point, we start investing in our children. Now, let's talk about children. We need to have healthy relationships with our children now, so that when we are retired, we can be able to have these relationships with our kids and grandkids that can add spice to our old age. Because if you don't get along with them now, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you get old and they just want to spend minimal time with you, and you miss your grandkids and you can't spend a lot of time with those grandkids, then what do you do? Because at that time you have time. At that point in your life, you have time. You just want to fill it with things that are meaningful. You want to fill it with conversation. You want to fill it with interaction with other people. And so you wish you could do that with your kids and your grandkids, but don't take that for granted because it may not be possible depending on the relationship that you had. Now let's assume your kids decided to get involved in drugs or crime, or chose a spouse that you did not like, or a lifestyle you did not like, and you were very hard and harsh with them over those choices. Okay, now you're retired, you'd like to spend some time with them. As you deal with the kids' choices in life now, while you still have energy and time and while you still don't need them, it's good to cultivate the kind of relationship where you're going to be able to spend significant time with your children and grandkids in your retirement. Because as your social circle shrinks, you get to rely more on the family. What you don't want, because someone may say, I'll move into an old age home. I'll be there with other, or a retirement village, where I'll be there with other people who are retired, we'll be able to do activities together. Yes, you'll do that, but you're going to miss your kids. You're going to miss significant relationships. You're going to miss the spouse part. You may not always be in control of that, but you need to have the quality of relationship so that whoever is part of your life at that point, they add value and you are able to add value to their lives. And if you're able to make sure mentally you're fine, time-wise, you figure out what you want to do with your time. And in terms of your relationships, those relationships have been so cultivated that there will be an asset to you in your retirement. Then retirement won't be that difficult, because you would have diversified yourself. It's your job, you're not your job, you're more than that. And the impact, you would have been prepared for the life after retirement. Of course, the finances hopefully are going to be able to carry you through retirement. But these aspects of preparing for retirement allow you to have a retirement that is not depressing to you, a retirement that is not unpleasant to you, but something you can look forward to and that you can enjoy. And as you wait for Jesus to come again, or the situation of you dying, it's not an unpleasant thing. Now, there's an aspect of preparing for retirement that we don't always talk about, and that is our health. Sometimes you can have all of these things, but if your health is not in the best of conditions, it may not be able to carry you through retirement. So things like your exercise and your diet and lifestyle now will be able to facilitate the quality of retirement at that point. So it's important that we think about these things and prepare for them, because if you don't die, you're going to retire. That's it. If you don't die, you're going to retire. And you want to have the smoothest possible retirement you can have with the choices that you currently have. Well, thank you very much. I think that's it for today. We will continue later with Sister Ruth when we talk about financial preparation for retirement. Thank you. I think we'll take questions now, Sister Connie, if there are any.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pastor. As you were speaking, Chandrell, my husband, didn't make it now because he's busy doing some training in Pretoria, right? Mm-hmm. But what he doesn't understand is that I am preparing for retirement. I've got a cupboard full of material because I do patchwork. And
Have you started doing patchwork?
Bags.
Have you started?
Yes, that's what I do. Yes. Okay. So he doesn't understand that I prepare for retirement by buying material every month. So please speak to him. He just wants to get rid of my material, and it's for my retirement. I've got to tell him that when he gets home.
I've never heard that one. I like it.
Now I know what to tell him. That's my material. He fights with me over it because he says I'm a hoarder. It's not. It's for my retirement.
Preparing for retirement, yes.
Yes. So if there are questions anyone would like to ask, as Pastor said, we're going to follow it up with Sister Ruth, not this evening, but she's going to do a talk for us on financial preparedness for retirement, which is also very important.
Very important, yes.
Yes, because retirement will probably not be nice if there isn't money. That's why I wouldn't want to retire, because I love walking around, but it would be torture for my soul if I can't buy anything. And I must just look at stuff all the time.
The financial part is very important, because many people dread retirement because they don't know how they're going to finance their day-to-day living. So this is why that one is very important, what Sister Ruth is going to come and talk about. Very important, so that you can be able to finance your life when you are retired.
It is, and also the aspect that you mentioned, Pastor, that we must accept the fact that we are aging. Like, I look at children when they call me auntie, then I think to myself, now, do I look like an auntie? Or and sometimes I look at myself in the mirror and I think, no, man, is that me? Oh my word, yes, it is. So yeah, but I'm going to go many things, but I'm not going to go gray, Pastor. I will not be going gray at this stage in my life.
There's a hand up there. I suspect it's Ruth, because it's got SAU meetings.
Yes.
Ruth, are you there?
Sister.
Oh, I am very much here. I am very much here. So this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. In fact, it's my bread and butter. And
Yes.
and so I just wanted to, Pastor Mandla, just ask you a question, or maybe just put the cat among the pigeons. You know, sometimes we have stay-at-home spouses.
Yes.
And we are the workers. And so in a sense, they've been retired, if you want to call it that. And then you now finally retire and you are also home.
Yes.
And I have quite a few people have not done this retiring with a stay-at-home spouse very well. And so that element of, I've had all this time and space to myself, and now I'm sharing this retirement journey, or this being at home with somebody that was working all the time. So we need to factor that also in when we look at retirement.
That is true. You see this long before retirement, when people have had to work in different towns, for example, or different cities or provinces, and then they come home for the weekend. And so what happens that when you come home for the weekend, everybody readjusts for you for the weekend. And so you come, then after a while, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you get a job closer home, so you come back home. And then there's a problem. The problem is they have their own routine when you did not live here, when you came on weekends. Now you're here and you're disrupting their routines. You're always here. You have opinions, you have ideas, you have suggestions. You want to change things that have been working well for so long, and that can cause conflict. Now, if that can cause conflict with people who have been married for a few years, but who have not been living together, imagine what happens when one has been a stay-at-home spouse. It's usually the wife who's the stay-at-home idea, a stay-at-home spouse. So she's been a stay-at-home a mom or wife, and she's been running this household in a particular way. She has a timetable, she has a system that's working. And now you come, you are retired, and you want to suggest things, you have ideas, you are here all the time, and it can cause some form of friction and conflict, because remember, you are retired, but the person who's always been at home doesn't really get to retire, because they're doing what they've always been doing. It's just that now you are interfering. Oh, when you are interfering like that, it requires that you have the conversations before you retire. Now, this is why it's important that you prepare to do something after retirement. And the other person must also know, because sometimes people say, go find something to do, go visit so-and-so, go do other things, not because they don't like you, but because you've been encroaching into their space. And as the stay-at-home spouse, they're not really retiring. They just continue with what they've always been doing. You are the one who's just messing up the system because you are here. So it becomes important for you to plan what to do with your life, because always being here will not always work well. And the quality of the relationship you had with your spouse is also going to help the transition, especially if the other one was a stay-at-home spouse. Thanks for raising that, Ruth. Oh, by the way, to everybody listening, this is the Ruth that's going to be doing the financial preparedness for retirement.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Pastor. And Pastor, yeah, retirement, as you mentioned, sometimes you're sickly, but I think it's also challenging for people when you have to retire on your own, because very often we plan on retiring together with our spouses, and somehow that is not a privilege that so many people can enjoy.
Yes, that is true. And it's a difficult thing to lose a spouse that close to retirement or just after retirement, because you have a lifetime of memories, a lifetime of understanding one another. You had these plans, you had these dreams. You don't just lose the loss of, you don't just mourn the loss of a spouse. You mourn the loss of dreams, the loss of plans, someone who understood you. Now, people will ask you a question like, why don't you remarry? And you think to yourself, do I have the energy to be having small talk with someone? I mean, by the time you retire with your spouse, I mean, you've been married for 20, 30, 35, 40 years. You did not need to have small talk anymore. You had passed the stage of small talk. You had passed the stage of, walking on eggshells. They just understood you and you're fine. And so it can be very difficult to retire in your home because we didn't plan for it. We didn't plan for it. And that requires that you really recalibrate your expectations of retirement. What now are we going to do? We were going to relocate together. What am I going to do now? Because it's now, what am I going to do? And you have to make those plans. And it's going to be, it can be a difficult transition.
And also, as you mentioned, we're aging. That person knows you from the time that you're young. You have aged together. Now, someone else is you're gonna take someone else, and you're both not well, and it's difficult to understand one another. I think when you haven't grown old together, and that's the benefit, I guess, of growing old together.
Yes.
Ruth wants to say something.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here quickly. You touched on something that's actually in my financial notes, but I think it's relevant here too. We sometimes the one spouse is not well. Say both are working, the one spouse then retires because they're not well. And then there's the question that is asked, what about the other spouse? Should they continue working? But the other one is battling, they're lonely, all of that kind of thing. Then what is normally advised, and I've attended many workshops by our big company, Sanlam, and all of them in preparation for retirement. The question to ask yourself as a couple is to say, the quality of my relationship, or let me say this, it doesn't matter what my income financially is. I will now work another 5 years, but what will it benefit me if I did not spend that most important time with my spouse when I could have? Take into account the cost factor, talk to somebody. I'll talk about that again, but I want to say, don't let the quality of your relationship override the rands and cents value. It's sometimes more important to look at, let me be here for this actually crucial time. We can always, it's amazing what we can do when we set our minds to it in terms of finances, if we bear in mind the quality of our relationship. My neighbor in Cape Town, her husband became very ill, and as a teacher, she brought her retirement forward with 2 years. And they had 3 years together, and then he passed away. And she said to me, Ruth, I have no regrets about that 2 years that I didn't take extra to enhance my pension. I had these 3 precious years with my husband. Yes, my pension is a little bit less, but I can now say I nursed him. I didn't know the amount of time, but I was with him, and I spent that quality time with him towards the end. I'm not saying that the person will pass away. I'm saying quality of life versus rand and cents. Sometimes the balance is not about money, it's more about the quality of the relationship.
True. Thanks a lot, Ruth. Thanks a lot.
That's so true. Also, Pastor, having worked in hospitals for many years, I also realized it's so important to invest in relationships. I once looked after a gentleman, and his wife had visited him every day. And then, he was about to pass away and whatever. And I phoned her and I said, would you like to come? you know, he's really not going to make it for today. Are you coming? So she said, you know what? I have a hairdressing appointment every Thursday at 10 o'clock for the past 30 years. So go ahead and do what you need to do. I'll pass by after my hairdressing appointment. And so I don't think we must become the kind of partners where if we're really sick, then our spouses think, let me just get my hair done. That's what I've done all the time. You know, we are so insignificant that it's more important to do run-of-the-mill things that we have always done. Mm-hmm. So I think we must be the kind of partners that that will be missed, is what I'm saying.
Yes, no, it's good to invest in the relationships, good to invest, but nothing beats planning, because even when there are changes to your life, even when there are changes caused by health or death or whatever, or even tight money, it's better to adjust a plan that exists than to try and grasp at straws and create one, you know, now that you are pressed or put in a corner for you to be able to do it. So plan for your retirement long before you need it. Also because you may discover that some of the things you want to do may require time for you to prepare. I remember speaking to a gentleman who was about to retire, and his plan at retirement was to do guest lecturing. Now, he had planned to do guest lecturing for a while, which means that he intentionally did his post-grad degrees with the hope that he's going to do that. And he started doing lecturing part-time because that was his retirement plan. That's what he wanted to do. So it's good to plan ahead, because if what you want to do at retirement requires for you to acquire skill, acquire machinery, then you do that while you're still young, so that by the time retirement comes, you're not starting from scratch. So plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay, someone says, great advice. Thanks, Pastor. I need a balanced view on how to approach retirement in light of the end of times in which we live. That is, with this prospect of country living, I think, etc.
True. For example, if you have a dream of country living, for example, and Ruth may end up touching on this when she deals with the finances. You want country living. You want to get out of the city, go live out in the country, enjoy nature. Well, it usually costs more to do country living. Well, depending what kind of country living you need. Sometimes it's not only that it costs more money, it might cost less money, but it needs a lot more preparation. So you must prepare yourself to know that if I'm going to do country living, I'm going to sell this house. And if I sell this house, will I be able to have the money to move into the country living I want? If you want it, start identifying areas and start working with concrete figures, not estimates, so that you know that the transition to the country living is going to be well. And also make sure that your spouse is on board. I know that we've had people who decide, I want country living. Your spouse is not on board. And then you retire, you decide, I want to go, and your spouse, like, I'm not leaving, you go alone. In a situation like that, you can't sell the house and go do country living. Why? Because the spouse is still going to be living here. So you must make sure that you are both on board with this whole country living thing. And you are willing to make the adjustments, not just financial, but in terms of lifestyle. To the country living, so that it does not become a source of problems later on. You can't have this dream of country living on your own, but if you have it as a couple, then it's good. But on the other hand, you must be willing to say, we were going to do it together as a couple, but now that I'm left alone, you may want to recalibrate those expectations of retirement and say, I may not be able to do country living. Maybe now that my spouse has passed away or whatever, or is now ill, it might be better for us to move into a place that's closer to the kids. So you may need to have those plans later on, but it's good to have a plan. It's easier to change it than to start one from scratch. I would not advise that you start thinking country living at 65 and you're saying, I'm going to take my retirement money and put it into country living. I'm not sure if Ruth would advise it either, but I don't think it would be the best time in your life to decide to invest into something new. You're going to start from scratch. We're going to buy solar. We're going to have a borehole and all of these things. And do those things when you're way younger, so that you can be sorted. Thank you, Ruth. Ruth is indicating that another consideration is proximity to medical care. Yes, you don't want to be 2 hours away from a hospital, not after 65. You probably need more medical attention than you did before 65. So thanks a lot, Ruth. A very, very good consideration.
Pastor, another thing that I think is important is also for people to have medical aid in South Africa. Most of us have medical insurance or medical aid when we're young and we don't need it. Most of us really need medical aid when we start hitting our 60s. And sadly, that is when people do not have money. Within our context, we only have 16.4% of the population on medical aids or health insurances. And to go to government facilities is just not a good idea within our context, because we don't have the best health facilities, you know, in the public sector. And then you also have 30% of your medical staff that must look after the 86% of the population. It's just better to make sure that you have medical aid.
All right.
Ruth says on that, she advises people to have a hospital plan at least. Yeah, and that is so important. That is not even something that we can negotiate in our country. We have to have some form of medical cover. So,
but if you have some of these chronic conditions, Connie, that need medical attention, especially with specialists, then even though you may want something like country living, you must make sure that it's closer to good facilities that have all the specialists you need, because you don't want it to be too far, because you're saying it's cheaper for it to be too far. Now, which means that if you're going to want something that's going to be country, you know, out there, you know, embracing of nature, but at the same time closer to medical facilities and you know, good access to specialists because of your old age, then you must be prepared to pay more. That's it. You will have to be prepared to pay more for it. And for you to be prepared to pay more for it, you need to know now. Go around looking for places where you can be able to have this combination of good medical facilities and your country living, and figure out what the concrete figures are now, and you can start planning for them now instead of being shocked 3 years before retirement. Yo, I won't be able to afford this. So yes, plan ahead of time, do your homework very, very carefully, so that by the time you hit retirement, the big questions are answered already. And even if you have to make adjustments, you know, there are adjustments to an existing plan.
Thank you, Pastor. Carmen Dunn, hello, that's my cousin, everyone. So she says some hospital plans have an expiry date. I didn't know that. And she discovered that. So it's just so important, you know, we take care of ourselves when we're young, when we're working, we have all these fantastic plans, and, you know, we have good medical cover. When we really need it, that's when we run into problems. So I think we should also try and invest for unexpected expenses. Because also, having worked in hospitals and in ICUs, you see people having to sell their properties and stuff, you know, to cover medical bills, and that is really sad when people have to do that, and we need to somehow plan for that.
Now we really look forward to this presentation. Really, it's going to be very helpful. It's going to cover all.
Yes. So
but even she didn't plan to talk about it, now she has to.
Yes. So I'll send an ad out for when Sister Ruth is able to speak on, you know, the financial aspect of retirement, which is so important and which we often don't think about when we are young. You know, I never ever thought I would reach 53. It sounded so old when I was 10. You know, like the Lord would have come long ago. And suddenly you realize, you guys, life goes by quickly. So Sister Ruth, thank you. I will be in contact. I will send it out. And Pastor, thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. And thank you everyone for joining. Please join again when Sister Ruth speaks to us. And we have lots of other topics coming up. Just watch this space. Pastor Mandla is going to speak to us again on the 15th, and he's going to speak to us in April for a week for the engaged couples. But guys, watch the ads and invite more people, okay? we can't be the only ones listening to all this. I've just retired, and this is such excellent practical information. Thank you for the presentation. Looking forward to the financial aspect of it. God bless. The
Thank
next
you,
session is
Cecilia.
on the 15th. Yeah, the next session is on the 15th of March. We will send out the ad and communication, and please join, and please get other people to join as well. So Pastor, thank you. And can you please close us in prayer?
All right, let's pray. Our loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for life. You've given us the gift of life. And we thank you, Father, that we are able to think and plan for retirement. We do so with a hope that Jesus will have come long before we need to retire. But in the event that he doesn't, we pray that you may help us to plan and prepare for it, so that when we do retire, the adjustment is smooth. It is not as traumatic as it can be without the planning. I also pray for those people who are about to retire, that you may grant them wisdom and the peace of mind of accepting the things they cannot change, and trying to change those they can, and grant them, Father, the wisdom to know the difference. I pray for those who've already retired, who may look back and listen to this conversation and say, man, I wish I had known this then. I wish I had known this. I would have done things differently. Help them, Father, as they navigate their retirement, and pray that they may have a good and smooth retirement. I pray for the relationships that we have. May they be sufficient for us in our retirement. May they be a source of joy and happiness. I pray that the quality of those relationships may give us a pleasant retirement, whether it's with our spouses, with our children, with our friends, with the people we go to church with our neighbors. May those relationships add value to our lives. Also pray that you may grant us good health that will enable us to enjoy the time, relationship, and finances that we've put aside for retirement. Thank you for the Northern Conference Family Ministries Department who have facilitated and organized this evening. Continue to bless them and use them to minister to your people. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.